our first look, again, at the salaries for Sunday's main slate. Steve, quarterback, which guy stands out to you?
Yeah, I wasn't really considering Joe Burrow at first because, the Cincinnati Bengals, they already clinched their playoff spot and all, but going through the scenarios, they actually have a legit chance to take the number one seed. A few things need to happen here for that to happen, but they're not out of it. And I think the Bengals would love to grab that number one seed and kind of shock everybody here. And I don't know if anybody watched that game last night with the Browns. Holy crap, they look absolutely horrific. They lost like 3 of their defensive backs during that game due to injuries. Baker Mayfield's already like, just get me into surgery. I don't even want to play week 18. Get me out of here. That team looks like an absolute disaster. So with one team who has already basically given up, and then you got a team who has a shot to win the number one seed in the AFC with the Bengals, I'm liking what I'm seeing here from Joe Burrow at 7,200. He's one of the more expensive guys on this slate, but he's been absolutely locked in against the Chiefs, against the Ravens. Another good matchup here against the Browns. If he's healthy and those defensive backs are still out for the Browns, absolutely love Joe Burrow this week.
Yeah, Chase wants to lock up that Rookie of the Year. Joey B wants to lock up Comeback Player of the Year. Pearce, what about you, man? Which quarterback stands out to you here when you're looking at the salaries?
Final week of the season, that means it's going to be a Jordan Love week. We've seen this. I love this spot. We've seen historically these good teams that rest their quarterback and they let the next young stud or star step in and play with all the weapons, and they see what he's got and they put up a strong performance. Saw Patrick Mahomes do this a couple years ago. The most famous or infamous episode of this was 2011 with Matt Flynn stepping in for Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay against Detroit and throwing for almost 500 yards and 6 touchdowns. Now, Matt Flynn never did anything. He got a big contract, but in that week, he absolutely destroyed fantasy football. I would imagine that Jordan Love is going to be allowed to do whatever he wants. They're going to take the cuffs off of him and see what he's got and see if he's someone they can trust for next season. He's really cheap, and he's got tremendous upside, as we've seen from these one-time late-season quarterbacks in the past.
All right, yeah, he's $5,500 there at Detroit. Matty, quarterback you think you must roster this week? You like his price?
So I think Pearce is right, kind of, because I think Aaron Rodgers will play like a quarter or so, and then we'll see all of that from Jordan Love after that. That may actually be enough, 3/4 of him at 5,500. He's pretty far down there. I think this week everyone is playing Jonathan Taylor. One, because the Colts need to win, and then he's got incentives in his contract. There's rushing record. There's all of that stuff. He's trying to win Offensive Player of the Year, potentially MVP. And it's going to be really easy to fit him at 9,300. So Carson Wentz is the guy I'm looking at here. He's pretty underpriced for what's a really, really good matchup against the Jaguars. 5,800 for him, 5,900 for Pittman. I think this is a pretty good stack. And then I think you're also getting a ton of leverage on Jonathan Taylor. Maybe Jacksonville scores a touchdown or two early and the Colts actually need to throw the ball. That's the scenario I'm looking for. So for like the GPP leverage play, this is the one, at least at this point of the week, that stands out. I'm sure a lot could change, but for now, I'm going with Wentz.
Dude, I'm not kidding you. When I typically call the Jaguars America's team, everyone thinks I'm kidding. No, this week, everyone is a Jaguars fan, because if the Jaguars somehow beat the Colts in Week 18, the Chargers and Raiders, who play on Sunday Night Football, they only have to finish in a tie. So neither team will really be that motivated to win, and then both of them will make the playoffs. We could just see them kneel down like 30 times a game, Steve.
I would be classic, and it'd probably be more entertaining than the game we saw last night. So I'd be all for it.
Dude, me too. Steve, who do you like at running back though?
Yeah, look, I'm imagining that the Packers are going to rest some of their starters in this one. So if that's the case, A.J. Dillon going up against the Detroit Lions at 6,200 feels like a really enticing option. We have to wait and see what the news and what the plan is for the Packers in this one, but they really have nothing left to play for at this point. But even in the timeshare with Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, at least in my opinion, looks like the better back at this point. I love everything that I see from A.J. Dillon. Had a really strong game last week against the Vikings. Another really bad run defense. There, 14 carries, 63 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 catches on 3 targets. He was fantastic there. Now he's got just as good of a matchup this week against the Lions. Again, don't lock him in just yet. See what the Packers want to do. But even if he's in that timeshare, if he's going to take maybe a 60-40 split in this game, I love A.J. Dillon at 6,200 against the Lions. If he was a starter, he'd be much more expensive in this game.
Hey, Matty, a running back that has a price tag you just can't fade.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to see on the Packers because I think the starters will play a little, but if they don't, then yeah, all of these guys become much more appealing. And 3/4 of A.J. Dillon too, just like with Jordan Love. Like that's still very, very appealing. Again, I think Jonathan Taylor is the guy everyone will play because we're going to have all this value open up. I think there's a chance Nick Chubb doesn't play. I mean, the Browns seemed intent on not carrying in Week 18 with Baker Mayfield maybe sitting. So Dearness Johnson is $4,800. Like, that would probably become, at least to this point, the slate's best value play if we get that scenario. I'll give one more quick pick in case we don't get that. Alvin Kamara as like the pivot off of Taylor. The Saints need this game. I mean, they probably aren't getting in the playoffs even if they win, but they're not going to know that at the time they play their game. So they're going to be out there trying to win. Kamara's $8,300. They're playing the Falcons. I mean, it's not like it's a hard matchup or anything. And I would imagine that he's substantially less popular than Taylor is. So Kamara, I think, is, as of now, like my favorite guy to pay up for here.
Yeah, Saints get into the playoffs with the win over the Falcons and a 49ers loss to the Rams. We talked a little bit about it yesterday, Pearce. Two very possible outcomes there. Who do you like at running back?
Steve and Matt bring up an important point that we don't know who's going to be fully committed to each game, who's going to play each game. And so we have a natural tendency to pay up to get these big-time performers, but we're not sure that paying up is going to result in 4 quarters of full-time action. So you may want to lean down the salary schedule and take some of these cheap guys like LeVeon Bell is going to be really the only guy in Tampa. We predicted Keyshawn Vaughn was going to have a big game against Carolina a couple weeks ago, and he finally had it. Well, now he's got bruised ribs. Jones is unlikely to go. Fournette is not going to be available. That means Le'Veon Bell, even though he might be out there in a walk or barely getting 2.5 yards per carry, he's going to be the only guy they have. And he's provided a 7 reception point floor, which is solid and safe, which could be more with the receiving situation being what it is in Tampa. And we also know that when it comes to goal line carries, it's going to be Lev Bell. It sounds ugly and gross at that price point, but I think you got to get used to some of these plays that you normally wouldn't do because it is Week 18.
All right, well, in the wide receiver department, it's not a shocker here as I'm taking a gander at salaries. You got Cooper Kupp as the highest priced guy. Matt, is he almost – he's a must roster at this point. Is he not? And the Rams need this game. They could. They could get that first place.
The Rams do need this game. So, again, the issue is going to be how many other people have him. I like him a lot. So just to go back to what Steve was talking about with Joe Burrow, I think that might be the pivot to play some of those expensive receivers. I do have a concern that maybe the Bengals look at the scoreboard at halftime and the Titans are up 3 touchdowns on the Texans and they say, we can't get the 1 seed now. So we'll take our foot off the gas. But maybe that doesn't happen and the Titans don't play well and the Bengals actually have a shot at it and they just, go for it through the whole game. So I think if you're playing cash games, you just play Kupp. It'll be easy to fit him. GBPs, though, I think T. Higgins in particular, 7,200. Like Chase is coming off the big game. I would imagine T. Higgins isn't as popular. Chase also has the narrative going for Rookie of the Year. So Higgins, I think, probably is the lower owned of the two. Last week, Chase, like no one played Chase. And I think Higgins could be in the same spot this week.
All right, Pearce, how about you, man?
Deontay Johnson at 7,600, 15 targets in Monday Night Football. If you're going to get 15 targets from Johnson against the Baltimore Ravens, you kind of got to take that. Now, he did turn those 15 targets into 31 yards, which might be some sort of record. I think that perfectly summarizes what that Monday Night Football game was. But it could be different against the Ravens, 19th when it comes to missed tackles, and they are second worst when it comes to yards after the catch. So 15 targets from a team that doesn't tackle well, allows a lot of yards after the catch. There's a really good chance that you're going to turn one of those 15 targets into big plays. You look at every Ravens metric and they are bad against the pass. So I think if you're going to get 15 targets against this poor team, you just kind of got to lock this one in.
All right, Steve, which wide receiver has the best price this week in your opinion?
Yeah, Stephon Diggs at 7,800 going against the Jets. This was a secondary he absolutely decimated back in Week 10. 8 catches, 162 yards, and a touchdown in that game for 33.2 DraftKings fantasy points. I mean, look, the Buccaneers were behind the majority of that game. Brady threw for over 400 yards in that game. Don't let that score fool you. This is a secondary you can still beat downfield. The Bills absolutely need this game too. They need to win this one if they want to clinch the AFC East. This is going to be a big game for them. So Josh Allen is going to be focused on his number one guy. That's Steph Diggs. Love him at 7,800 this week.
Pearce, tight end. This is where you shine. Is there someone cheap you actually really like this week?
I don't think you're going to need to go down cheap at tight end this week with all the other value plays, being that it is the final week. But there will be plays that will pop up. We're going to see that people are injured or that we're going to see weird lineups. So keep your eye on that. John Bates looks like one of the guys cheap-wise that might pop up, but you can definitely pay up. I'm not going to go all the way up. I'll go with Pat Freiermuth. I'll just keep attacking this Ravens secondary. It never lets you down. Even when the Ravens secondary was healthy at the beginning of the season, their scheme did not work well against tight ends. They allowed plenty of fantasy points. We know Ben Roethlisberger can't quite get the ball downfield anymore. He can barely get the intermediate routes working. So Freiermuth's going to get 6 to 8 targets. And we also know 18 red zone targets on the season, 7 touchdowns. If tight end comes down to chasing touchdowns, you can go with a long shot and save some money. You can pay up, or you can pay right in the middle and get a really good shot of a touchdown with Pat Freiermuth.
All right, Steve, what's your strategy here at tight end, bro?
You know, when DeAndre Hopkins was out for the Cardinals, it's like, oh, who's going to be the new top receiver? It's really been Zach Ertz. 33 targets in the 3 games now that he's played without DeAndre Hopkins. Zach Ertz has been the guy that, Kyler Murray's been kind of leaning on here. 9, 13, and 11 for his targets over his last 3 games. Now he's facing one of the worst defenses in the league in the Seattle Seahawks against the opposing tight ends. I mean, in typical Zach Ertz fashion, he gets all these targets, doesn't do a ton of production with him, but with that type of volume at 5,300, if I told you there was a wide receiver that was getting about, 10 targets a game in the 5K range, you'd be jumping all over that. So Zach Ertz going up against the Seahawks, can't defend that position to begin with. I'll take that all day, baby.
Okay, who are you going to take all day, Maddie, Sunday, week 18?
So just a point we've been talking about a little bit, watching for rest. I think one of the ways to try to get a good handle on motivation and things like that is to look at the betting lines, because that'll kind of give an indication of like, why is this line moving this way? Maybe someone knows something about guys sitting for the second half. And one of the spots I'm looking at here is like, maybe the Rams just decide they don't really care a ton about the division, and maybe they just don't play their defensive starters the whole game, their offensive starters, whatever. It could be an easier matchup for George Kittle in a game the 49ers do need to win to get into the playoffs. So I think that spot could set up well. I mean, even if the Rams do play their guys the whole game, Kittle's 6,700. He can certainly do well at that price tag. But if you have to go cheap, Cole Kmet, I think, is in a good spot. He was last week, too, against the Giants. The Bears were just up by so much they didn't really need to throw. I think against the Vikings, that won't be the case. It should be a close game. Kmet could do well. So those are really my 2 guys this week.
And then, Steve, what about like a value play? I know we've mentioned a couple times, like each team's situation is totally different. We don't know how long many starters will play for certain squads. So is there someone you have your eye on early right now, the cheap price tag, who could give us a lot of points?
Yeah, talked about him last week, scored 2 touchdowns. Antoine Wesley over with the Cardinals, going back to the Cardinals here. He's also been someone that's seen a bump in play since DeAndre Hopkins went down. Has seen 15 targets over his last 3 games since Hopkins was out. He scored 3 touchdowns in that span. If they're going to keep giving him the ball, he goes downfield too. He's seen 6 targets already of 20 yards or more. So if he's going to go to him and going to him deep, 4,100 is not much to pay for to get him in your lineup.
Pearce, value play.
Tyrell Grayson, he kept his jersey on last week, and 8 targets or 6 catches, 81 yards, and a touchdown. The Buccaneers are going to be without Antonio Brown. They're without Chris Godwin, and also Mike Evans. We don't know his status. I mean, he's going to be out there, but how much are they going to use him? And as much as this team should play conservatively, we know that Brady will pass 30 to 40 times. They've got to go somewhere. It looks like it's going to go to Cyril here in this spot. So he's just too cheap to pass up with the volume that he's going to get.
All right, Matt, is there someone too cheap to pass up in your eyes?
I don't think so, because by the time Sunday rolls around, there's going to be like 65 of these value plays just based on all the news that's likely to come through before then. So the guy that seems the most underpriced to me, and I guess is part of a good stack that I think has a lot of upside, it's that Bengals-Browns game, and Case Keenum, if he starts, is $4,800. So that allows you to do a lot if you play some cheaper Browns. Maybe Jarvis Landry doesn't play this week either, and you could play him with an even cheaper receiver against a Bengals team that you probably are going to need to score against. I mean, the Browns don't care about this game necessarily. It would just be nice to end the season on a good note. So if the Bengals are still throwing the ball a ton, trying to get the 1 seed, trying to get Chase Rookie of the Year, all of that, the Browns are going to have to throw too. And I think this could be a really, really cheap overall passing game. But Keenum, 4,800. I mean, that's probably the cheapest viable quarterback we're going to get this week.